You are listening to the My First Period podcast, and today we talk all about education, period poverty, and sanitary products with Rachel Hatley. Enjoy! Hello, and welcome to the My First Period podcast with me, Lucy Evers, and my extra special guest today is fashion writer, film photographer, and all-round good egg, Rachel Hatley!
Oh, I want that intro every time I walk in a room, please. That was lovely.
We have chatted about this a few times, but we're now doing this for real. So we've had a conversation about our opinions. As friends, we are very period vocal people. Would you agree?
Period vocal. I love that term. Let's use that.
We chat a lot about periods, and we're just very open as people, I suppose.
Yes.
So let's kick off with the story of your first period. Let's start there.
Well, it's an interesting one because originally when we spoke about doing this, I was like, I'm not sure mine's that interesting. Nothing really special happened. But actually, as we got talking about it, we sort of realised that my first period experience, the difference with mine to other people's perhaps, is that it came so late. I was 17 when I had my first period. So that's kind of the part that I think I might talk about most during this, because that's the bit that really probably affected me the most. The actual period, the day that it happened, was very untraumatic and very just very normal, because by that point I had heard all the horror stories. I'd seen all my friends go through it. My mum had been warning me for at least 6 years what was going to happen. So I was fully aware of what to expect. So when it actually happened, I was in my bedroom, so I wasn't even in public. So it was very, very lucky. I was in my bedroom and I got really bad tummy cramps, and I thought, hang on a minute, I know these signs. This is what I've been warned about. Here we go. And then I looked in my knickers and there was blood in there. And I went running down to my mum in the kitchen and I said, Mum, it's arrived. Almost like this massive relief. Me and my mum have a really close relationship and we've always been able to talk about these things. So I showed my mum the blood in my knickers and she was like, yep, that's it. Good. That's one ticked off the box then, finally. So really the actual experience of it starting was very almost comforting. It was a big relief. My mum was there with me. I was at home. So that bit was lovely, but it was more the run up to it that was the part that really affected me, because like I said, all my friends had started. There was even stuff like being said about me at school, like, oh, is she even a girl? Oh, will she ever start it? Oh, you're not a woman. Not necessarily like overly nasty. There was nothing that really upset me, but it was definitely like a big stigma around the fact that I hadn't started.
Yeah.
And I feel like there was only one other girl in my year who I knew of who also hadn't started. So really, it was sort of portrayed as something really weird, and I was made to feel weird because of it. But that's something that I would really like to explore, because actually, since being more vocal about periods and stuff with other people, I've noticed that actually a lot of people start quite late, and it's not always the case of starting when you're younger.
That was something that when we first spoke about it, as someone who was younger, it shocked me. It really surprised me. So I was like 12, 13. So for me, it was like, oh my God, you started that late. And I think my actual initial reaction was, wow, aren't you lucky that you didn't have it when you were a teenager? Yeah. And then we started having a conversation more about it. And I thought, no, but that's not the case, because you had the run up bit of it.
Yes,
mine was embarrassing and it was at school, but I was young and I got over that embarrassment kids are resilient, so you get over that embarrassment quite fast. Whereas yours was drawn out, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, in a funny way, it's a tricky one, because there's pros and cons, and you weren't the first person to say that I'm lucky either. So don't feel bad, because actually I've had so many people like, oh my gosh, you're so lucky. And in a way, I completely agree, because I had basically finished high school. Yeah. So I think I was just finishing off doing my GCSEs when it started. And it was coming up to the summer. So I had basically gone through the whole of high school without having a period, which is really lucky. I mean, I'm not naive to that fact, because I watched all my friends having to run to the toilet and having to, you know, especially if we had male teachers, they were a lot less understanding about having to get to the toilet quickly or having to go home because they were just in so much pain. And also, it's all new to you when you're that age. Like when I'm on my period, you know what to expect.
Yeah.
I think all my friends going through that, it was different every time. Sometimes they went 3 months without one, then they'd have like one for 2 weeks that was really heavy. And I was sort of watching all of this, anticipating it. So although I do feel lucky that I didn't have a period during the whole of my high school experience, because I really think that would have been the thing that pushed me over the edge, to be quite honest, I think the anticipation of it did play a part. However, I actually think it helped me to prepare for it, because like I say, I watched everyone else go through it. I saw all the horror stories and I just knew what to expect. Like I almost had this 6 years of preparation and almost vicariously having a period through all my friends every month, which I do feel very grateful for. And I actually feel like if schools had like a proper curriculum in place where they had like a module where they talked about this openly, most girls would feel how I did by the time mine came, because I completely knew what was going to happen.
So you'd kind of had so it should probably mention you went to an all-girls school. So
I did, yeah.
I suppose that's a brand new, for me, that would be a brand new way of experiencing something like that. So
yeah,
you're in a position where we're not saying here you were the last one to start out of 15 girls. You were the last one to start out of a whole year, which is, I don't know how many people there were in your year, but it's rather than just being a class, you're of like a vast amount of girls. So being in an all-girls school, that hearsay and that bigging it up doesn't get opened because there's nobody else around to filter that conversation.
Exactly.
So that conversation is, in a good way, like you've just said, was great because you learned a lot and it taught you a lot about your period before it even started. But isn't it a shame that it was your peers that had to teach you that and not somebody of like an adult?
Yeah, no, for sure. It was funny because obviously a lot of my friends started a similar age of like you, like between 12 and 14. So they're all thrown in at the deep end, because before that you don't really get told about, you know, that you're going to bleed every month, or your mum might have said something to you, or you've noticed that she uses tampons or pads, what are these sort of thing. But no one really gives you like the true hardcore facts. I feel like it's always very like, you know, like what you've been through with your endo, I bet no one told you that was even an option or a possibility that could happen.
No, that wasn't even a conversation. When I first heard about endometriosis, I genuinely think I'd seen you in the morning and then went home and was just Instagram scrolling like you did, and came across Venus, who is another guest on this, and she was doing an Instagram live or some kind of Instagram story thing about, she just had surgery and she was having a whole conversation with it about the pain and everything that she'd gone through. And she listed these few things: pain during sex, ridiculously heavy periods, not just a heavy period, like a very an unusually heavy period, that you'd get spotting after sex, that you were experiencing moments of depression, like literally this list as long as your arm. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but the list was just endless. And I thought, I've experienced probably all but one of those things. So one of the things is, I think it's diarrhea and constipation. And at that point, I hadn't experienced any of that. In the last few months, I have. But at that point, luckily, I hadn't experienced any of it. And I would never have heard that word until she said it. I heard that word at school. That was never a conversation that was had. So my mum and quite a few family members, it turns out, have experienced endometriosis. But because we live in this society, and it's not because they're being malicious, because we live in this society where it's not spoken about, no one told me that this was an option.
Exactly. And I think that's something that's so interesting. And like going back to the point about me being at an all-girls school, obviously I'm lucky in the fact that I think we had one lesson on it, but like one lesson's better than none. But yeah, we did have a lesson on it, and I still feel like so much more could have been done. Like, it was an all girls school, like every pupil was identifying as a female, and I just feel like not enough was done to help us go through those things. Like, there was never any, I know like this is a law that's come through in a couple of countries in the UK now, but like sanitary, like emergency sanitary products in toilets in a girls' school is absolutely essential, because when you are, we're not talking about women who have been having a period for 20 years at this point. This is all new, and the amount of times people forgot pads or tampons or whatever they were using was obviously really common. And you're a child still, like you're still a child, and it was just expected that you'd had to get on with it and we're talking about 10 to 16-year-olds here, but that was the general consensus, and this is including teachers, that if we needed to go to the toilet, you had to wait until the end of the lesson. Now, if you have a tampon in and you last changed it before you left for school and you get the bus to school, that's been in you for like at least 4 hours.
Yeah.
I just find it unimaginable that happened.
That's not your decision to go, I can wait to go to the bathroom. It's you have no choice but to sit in here and wait.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you're not concentrating. You're worried that your tampon's falling out, or that you're spotting or bleeding on the chair, which happened.
Yeah.
Like, it really did. Then your education has taken a setback because of something that was naturally happening to you that an adult decided they didn't have time for.
Exactly.
And I feel that happens so many times.
I think we should mention we are quote unquote lucky in the fact that we live in the UK, and we are lucky that these things are in a local chemist. But period poverty lies with a lack of education, a lack of resources, and a lack of monetary funds in order to go and purchase these products.
100%.
And there wasn't an option. I mean, I don't know about your school, but there wasn't an option in my school to run to the nurse and go, have you got a pad? Have you got a... No. When I started my first period, I had to get my pad off of my drama teacher.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything with me. And it's not for my mum's... You've met my mum. She's a great human being. Not because she didn't want to help me. It's that she physically couldn't. I was in school. What are you going to do? So I think it's the point that if you're lucky enough to be in a circle or a situation where somebody can give you a hand, you shouldn't feel ashamed or upset to take that help. And I think that's where a lot of it lies in, especially in schools. Maybe not so much if you're like in your 20s when you start, because that does happen. And when you're in school, I think you feel ashamed of asking for help, and ashamed of, like, you would whisper around class and be like, has anybody got a pad? Like, how would you whisper? Like, hide it up your sleeve. We said this, didn't we? Like, you would hide it up your sleeve.
And do you remember you could get those little tins that you could hide your pads in, and it was just like
worst pattern on them ever. They were always ugly.
Why am I hiding this in a girls' school when we're all menstruating for somewhat? Obviously, I at the very end, but like, at least it's all something that we perhaps would be going through.
And it's not just... Oh no, go ahead.
No, I was just like saying again, I mean, I know not everyone goes to a girls' school, but that's where my real gripe is. Not that I know of, there was no provisions in place for anybody who came on while at school. And that's something that just, like, still to this day just really annoys me. And if there was, and I didn't know about it, why didn't I know about it? You obviously didn't make it obvious enough, because I could, like, if a teacher came forward now and was like, oh no, we had like sanitary towels in our drawer, you could always ask. No one knew that. No one was told. So it's all well and good that there were sanitary towels in the first aid office or whatever. But if you haven't told any of us, then we're not going to know to ask, are we? And also, if it's like, if you've just started, then was perceived as embarrassing at the time.
I think that's the thing that is really where the crux of this lies, is that it's the shame around it. It's the be embarrassed. People are embarrassed about all kinds of things. Embarrassment is a gut instinct, and you can't stop that. But why is there shame around? I always say this phrase, and it may not be true, but in my head it makes sense. It's more common to menstruate than it is to masturbate. So why do we talk about masturbation all the time and not talk about menstruation? Why is there disconnect between those two things, because I was embarrassed when I was a kid, but I am a gutsy enough human being. I mean, maybe it's just the way I've been raised. I wasn't ashamed of it. After, the first few years, I was absolutely mortified at dance shows, at like performances. I'd like not go to dance class because I had to wear a leotard, and I'd be ashamed of that. Be embarrassed, that's absolutely fine. But when the shame creeps in, there's an underlying issue there.
And the difference is, I think, is embarrassment is a personal feeling and shame is a feeling that's been placed upon you. And embarrassment, like you say, is a natural gut instinct. But if you are embarrassed about something, yet you feel you can talk to somebody about it, the embarrassment is instantly halved. Shame comes from other people placing that upon you.
Yeah.
You don't feel shame in about yourself. That's always come from an outside source. And I think that's the thing that stops a lot of people being vocal about this, because of the stigma that is placed around it.
Yeah, totally. Do you think, as someone that went to an all-girls school and someone that was started their period slightly later in your teenage years, do you think that's had a hold or an overriding impact on your experience now as an adult who bleeds?
I think yes, but not too much of an extreme. The only time I can really feel like that really affected me was because, although I didn't go through high school having a period, I then went through college having periods. Now, that is what I found really difficult. So I had my first period as I was doing my GCSEs. I left high school and I went to college in the September. So by this point, periods were all new to me. And everyone who I was now in college with had been doing it for at least, let's say, 2 to 6 years previous.
Yeah.
Then I still had very probably simple questions that I was asking. Girls that were in my class were helpful to an extent, but also some of them were just really awful people as well. But it was hard to find people to talk about it with who were my age. Yeah. And I often went back to my mum, and I'm very lucky that I have the mother that I have, because she's incredible. All of these things have always been a very open conversation between us, and my dad as well. I can always talk about these things with him too. So I'm very lucky that I have that. But if I hadn't have had that, I really do wonder where any of my advice and help would have come from, because I found college quite an isolating place. And I know that's a personal thing and not everybody goes through that. But I'd gone through the whole of high school not having a period until the end. And then I'd started college and it was all new. And I didn't really have anyone my age to talk to about it. And I quite often just didn't really know what I was doing. Obviously, putting a pad in is really simple, but when it's new to you, in the toilet, oh my gosh, I don't really like doing this. And am I taking it out right? Is there a special way I should be doing it? And like I said, I talked to my mum about this very openly, but it would have been nice to have had, I don't know, even just simple things up in the girls' toilets. Just if you need any help, if you need some emergency products, go to this place for them. And I think that in the high school too, I just don't understand why that wasn't a thing.
Isn't that interesting? Because until you said that, I don't think that's ever entered my head. I genuinely don't ever think I've thought there should be a poster in a bathroom. Why isn't there? That's not, until you said that just then, I'm a little gobsmacked. I don't know why I've never thought of that before.
Well, I think because it's just never been a thing.
No, that's it. Why is that? Why do we get taught how to put a condom on a cucumber when some people have never used that skill ever? I've never used algebra, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Why are we taught these things that are, for some people, completely null and void and are never going to make a difference to your life? Whereas every person with a uterus, well, the vast majority of people with a uterus, unless you have an underlying condition, bleeds. Why isn't there a poster in your school toilet? Maybe that's something, $1 million idea, Rach.
I know. Well, I'm going to patent it. Yeah, I just feel like a poster would have been so helpful, and just to say, literally 3 columns: how to put a pad in your knickers, how to insert a tampon correctly, and probably not so much when we were in high school, but perhaps now, how to insert a moon cup correctly.
Yeah, our generation, they're brand new.
Oh yeah, 100% brand new. I mean, I've still never tried one. It's just funny. I feel like there's also even now, I'm a woman and I still worry about that, because what if I can't do it properly? And I'm sure that has come from never being taught in school how to insert these things properly.
Yeah.
And now there is a fear. And honestly, I basically just use pads because I just don't know how to insert the other two.
It's that inherent thing, like in my school, I didn't go to a girls' school. We had a assembly in school, and all the girls of my year were sat down, and two of the people in my year had got a pad and stuck it against the toilet door and like scribbled over it in red pen, and it was like unacceptable that had happened. And I kind of sat there and was like, but you've never spoke to us about this. Never. So this is kind of a rebellion. You've never ever sat down and spoke to any of us about this. Obviously that's not how you put a pad on. Obviously we're not silly here. That's kind of well, you're not telling me how to do it, so I'm gonna throw a paddy, because they're teenagers. They need that basis of education and yet we, like we say, we're still lucky, we still live in the UK, and you do get a blanket sex education. It's very minimal, but there's at least some kind of experience there, or at least there's a conversation in the playground. Do you know what I mean? There's at least hearsay.
Those are like
terrible.
I remember when like someone first told me like about being eaten out and stuff, and I was like, people do that? And and now I don't think anything of it. But obviously at the time I was like, oh my God, like it was just like the things that would come out. Honestly, it's never like an actual educational conversation. It's like your friend has had sex with a boy, and it's just the most ridiculous story about what they did, and it's never what actually happened.
I imagine in a girls' school that just would have been heightened, because our school we didn't even have bike sheds or anything in our school. My school was quite new. It was like a newly built school, so there wasn't, everything was built so I think you could be watched. No one could ever be not seen, I think. My head teacher was not stupid, I don't think. But so ours was, I don't know what yours would have been called. I suppose it's civics, or ours was called personal development education. Like,
ours was like PSHE or something. Personal social something.
It all had like a weird phrase. And our PDE teacher was actually one of my mum's friends. So I felt quite comfortable, luckily, going and asking for her help and asking for her advice. I was very lucky that I had that. I felt really comfortable asking my mum for advice. And I didn't have any, like you've said, I didn't have any particular friends in school that I could ask for advice, but I had people outside of school that I felt comfortable talking to. But there's that thing of, why can't you say to the girl next to you, I've just come on my period, and like, can you give me a hand? Where whisper, or you'd run to the toilet, or I knew people that use socks, for God's sake.
I used to, like, if I'd forgotten, I would just roll up toilet roll over and over and over and put that in my knickers, and then like when I'd be sat at a lesson, I'd be so still and like I wouldn't be able to move, because I was thinking, if I move, this thing's gonna fall out in front of everyone, because we had to wear skirts as well. That's a whole nother topic, that one.
That's a whole, because we didn't have to, my school, we didn't have blazers, we didn't have ties, we didn't have anything like that. We had comfortable uniforms that were like jumpers, polo shirts, and you could wear trousers or skirts or shorts. You could wear them as long as your whole backside wasn't out, you could more or less wear what you wanted. Whereas that's a whole other thing.
We were allowed to wear trousers in the winter.
Right.
But most people didn't. Like, they wore just really thick tights with their skirts. Actually, our uniform was like, I used to think it was horrendous at the time, but it would be so in style right now, because we had like little pointed tennis skirts with like a sporty jumper, which is like all over Pinterest at the moment. So I might whip out my old school uniform. But actually, our school wasn't even the worst in the borough. There was another school just down the road from us who they were only allowed to wear skirts, never trousers.
I can't even, I don't actually think, I think I wore a skirt once I mean, I'm very tall, and I was always very tall in school, and I was always very conscious of that fact. So I never wore skirts, because if I wore a skirt, I wore it for 2 months and then it was too short. So it was, For me and my mum, it was like, well, it's just a waste of money, isn't it? Whereas you can buy a pair of trousers and take the hem out a couple of times and you'll be fine. I still don't wear skirts or dresses now when I'm on my period.
Yeah. And do you know what? That school down the road from us still have that rule in place.
That's disgusting.
They're still only allowed to wear skirts.
That's a conversation all of itself. That even rules like that exist. Like imagine being someone who's struggling with your identity or struggling with your. You don't think you sit in that quote unquote traditional female presenting side of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine having to go to school every day in a skirt.
Exactly.
And bleeding in a skirt, knowing that this is not how you identify.
Exactly. I think about that all the time, because when I visit home, sometimes I see the girls, like if it's a weekday, I see the girls going to school and I just think, how have they still got that rule in place? Like you can only wear this pleated skirt in that school, and that's also an all-girls school. It's interesting to point out. It's such an interesting topic. Like I've seen a couple of girls coming out of my old high school now, and I think they've changed it a little bit, because they do now. I've just noticed that a lot of them wear trousers now. So I think it's trousers or skirts, which makes a lot more sense. Like I said, we were allowed to wear trousers, but mainly only like in the winter months, really.
Right.
And only if it was really cold. But even then, like, I still feel the same. I mean, there were girls in our high school who didn't feel that they wanted to present as female anymore. And we also had girls from the LGBTQIA+ community who felt that a skirt didn't suit their identity. And I know that this brought up quite a lot by us, but I actually started a petition about it while I was in high school. Like, it was just a stupid issue to be fighting, even at that time, especially now.
I think now there's a lot more. I mean, we're both coming from a female presenting point of view.
Yeah.
I think me and you both consider ourselves an ally.
100%.
I can't imagine. I've always been someone who's been quite androgynous with how I dress. I don't wear a lot of. I wore a dress the other day, and I think everyone was really surprised. It's not like me.
I
love that dress. It's very pretty. That's something that in school, I think even the phrase all girls school, don't you think that phrase is slightly problematic now? I mean, it's always been problematic. It's more spoken about now. It's more easier to have a conversation about it now.
Yeah. And it's interesting because actually when I was talking about it earlier, I kept saying all girls school and my head was going, but not everybody identified as a girl there. Yeah. And then I didn't know what else to say, because what other term is there to use to describe a school that is, let's say, set up for one gender, but it does not mean that everybody there feels that they are that gender,
and that they are forced into that world. It probably heightens that emotion and that feeling even.
100%. And I feel like we had certain lessons that were there because it was a girls', I'm going to use the term girls' school for now, only because I just don't know what other term to use. There were certain lessons that were there purely because it was a girls' school. So like for GCSE, you could take childcare. Now that wouldn't be in a mixed school or a boys' school. However, that doesn't mean to say that boys wouldn't want to learn about that. Also, we had to do textiles for the whole time we were there. So we had to learn how to sew, because it's a good skill, and I managed to sew a cushion up the other day, so it came in handy. But my point is, why is that only a lesson at a girls' school and that wouldn't be a lesson at a mixed school?
Yeah, I never had those lessons.
I mean, perhaps I'm wrong. Maybe there are now, but I just thought, I think definitely at the time that I was at the high school, that those lessons were there because we were girls.
But isn't that funny that those lessons are objective, or they're 1950s rules, let's be real here. Yeah. They were probably in place then, and they've stayed in place that long. And it'd be interesting to find out if they were still in place. Mm. But it's interesting that those things, and like woodwork would be considered a male view. Like, isn't that interesting that those things are in place, but there's no lesson for menstruation? But everybody in that school had a uterus. Doesn't that blow your mind?
My exact point. And I'm not saying that textiles and childcare were useless, because they weren't. I did both.
For you, they were great. That's exactly what you wanted. Yeah.
Perfect. I wanted to do childcare anyway. So that, I'm not disputing that point. I'm not saying it shouldn't have been there. But perhaps what I'm saying is perhaps that they should be lessons that are carried out through all schools then. Because I tell you, it's coming real handy when I've put a hole in my jeans.
Yeah.
So I'm not disputing the fact that the lesson wasn't important, because it was. But I just find it very interesting that childcare and sewing were placed into a girls only school and not in a mixed or boys school.
Because I never had that. I would have loved to have had.
I've never come across anybody else who has either.
No, I mean, there was only, in my borough, as far as I'm aware, there was one all girls school and one all boys. As far as I'm aware, I think there was only, and it was the same school, but the buildings were split in half, as far as I can remember. None of the schools that I knew of had that. We had food and cooking, and we had design and technology.
Yeah.
And that was it. There was no, and I would have loved childcare. I would have loved to have done something like that in school. Isn't that interesting that that wasn't an option for a mixed school?
Exactly, because
even rather than compulsory, just an option.
An option, yeah, exactly. And this was an option for GCSE, so it wasn't compulsory, but it was definitely there because it was a girls' school. So I realised this isn't about periods, but I just feel like it actually all ties in, because I think
totally. That's the point where period poverty really gets into schools, and that's where really the shame comes from. Because wouldn't it have been interesting if in textiles you learned how to make reusable pads?
Yes, exactly.
I was talking to someone that I worked with a little while ago, and I had run out of pads, and the ones that I'm very lucky that my workplace have stuff in the bathroom. I mean, I think it's so we don't go home, but it's so everyone's okay. I think that's more of the point. But I mentioned that I'd run out, and the ones that there were only tampons left in the bathroom, and I was like, I can't use them. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But if it means that you're going to have to go home, or it means that you're going to bleed through your knickers.
Like I say about the moon cups, I just can't even fathom using one, because I have such a fear of even placing it in. Now, let's not be funny. Other things have been placed in my vagina quite easily. So why do I feel funny about putting something in that's going to help me when I'm on my period?
Exactly. And as two people that are quite eco-conscious people, I think we both are, and the products that we use are generally geared towards being green.
For sure, yeah.
But that's probably the greenest you can be. And neither of us, like, the thought of that, I can't even think about it.
No, I know.
I can't. I tried it once. I was so uncomfortable the whole day. I'd obviously done it wrong, but I was too ashamed to go up to someone that I knew used one and knew was wearing one there and now. And I was too ashamed to go up and go, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I honestly, like you said, I just think that stems from the lack of education and the stigma that is placed on it from the moment you start. From the moment you're even told what periods are, I just think that is ingrained into people who bleed. I really do.
That fear comes from the fact that there's no conversation.
Yes. It's a taboo thing to even bring up. And I hate that. And it's happened to me at work before. Like, and so I'm a nanny. I look after children, and I've taken them swimming before and come on my period that day. Yeah. And like, I know when my periods are going to start, because I'm also on the pill, which is probably something to mention as well. So I know exactly when my periods are going to start, because I decide when they start. But the thing is, I stopped taking my pill, and my periods start about 3 days after, 2 to 3 days after.
Right.
And honestly, the morning that I don't take it, I think, right, my period will be in about 2 days. If it comes early, I am not prepared. And this is talking about like my last period. I literally did the exact same thing. And like my housemate Sophie, I had run home from being out in town because I'd started to bleed. And Sophie was like, but not in a mean way, but she was like, oh, but you know when you're coming on because you're on the pill. And I was like, and yet I've still managed to do this. As a 25-year-old woman, yes, I've still managed to do this.
But that's where think about how many clothes. I mean, you're someone that loves clothes. I know this. And anyone that follows you on Instagram, Ray of Style, we know you love clothes. Think about the amount of pants and trousers we've just destroyed in life. And nobody warns you that. Nobody tells you, don't wear those trousers that week because you're going to ruin them. I've lost so many lovely clothes because I've been 5 minutes too late getting to the bathroom. And those 5 minutes were the crucial 5 minutes that Like, there was literally, you think, God, if I'd been here half a second earlier.
A good little tip from my mum that she's always told me: keep a bar of Vanish in your cupboard and you can't go wrong.
I love a mum tip.
You know what? That woman's not wrong. That bar of Vanish has got me through some tough times.
Bicarb.
Mainly food spillages, to be honest. A lot of curry sauce down my trousers. But yeah, also blood.
That's the thing, bicarb, or I always have bicarb in the cupboard.
Yep.
But they're things I learned because I ruined my favourite pair of jeans in school. Like, I think that's where the shame bit lies, that someone's going to point at you and laugh.
Yeah.
And isn't that upsetting that that's a reaction? That from experience, it's mainly like catty girls and like immature lads. From my experience, that's where that emotion has come from. Obviously, that's different for every single person. But from my experience, it's been, oh my God, she started her period. From a really immature little year 7 kid that doesn't know anything. And it's like, so why aren't the boys given that education as well?
Exactly. And it's funny you say that, but even in a girls' school, that still happened. Like I say, all the things that were said to me about not starting, like, oh, are you even a girl? Oh my gosh, how have you not started yet? That's so weird. Like, I've been on my period since I was 12. That's so crazy that you haven't even started. And even though they weren't necessarily nasty things,
you remember them.
I remember them, and it was just also adding fuel to the fire that was already in my head about why I hadn't started. So like, yeah, okay, I get it. I'm different because I'm starting quite late, but also there's probably 10 other girls in this year that also haven't started, and you just haven't picked up on the fact that they don't go to the toilet very much. And it was only because I was stupid enough, well, not stupid enough, but I was honest about not starting. You know, I could have just said, oh yeah, I started ages ago. And even actually, funnily enough, that reminds me, near the end of high school, I actually just told everybody that I'd started, and I used to carry one of my, like a sanitary towel from my mum's cupboard in my school bag to make it look like I was prepared, because I was so done with people asking if I'd started or like making fun of me for not starting yet. So I literally just went in one day, and I was like, oh, just so you know, I also started my period last night, so you can stop asking me about it now. And I was like, look, I've even got a pad, and like just tried to shut them all up. And I actually didn't start for another 6 months after that, I think.
And that's such a shame, that the ridicule of that did not only convince you to lie about it, you remember that upset. And I think that's why I was so keen to start this, is because I was lucky enough, my mum was a teacher, so she had some friends in the school, that I had someone literally to run to. And I avoided that whole day, that whole first day, I managed to avoid any other like teenager. I completely avoided them. I'm very lucky that happened. But isn't it sad that that stayed with you this whole time?
Exactly.
That's why I wanted to start this, because I wouldn't want any other young menstruator to feel attacked by their peers, because everybody's going to grow up to be completely different, and we are very lucky that we're beginning to live in a world where being different is very slowly but gradually becoming more accepted. The phrase not all women menstruate and not all people who menstruate are women, I think that phrase is becoming more common now, which I think is a brilliant thing.
Oh, definitely. It's a very important topic to be talking about, because like we say, I went to a girls' school, but not everyone there identified as a girl.
Yeah.
And yet on our jumper, it said, blah, 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 high school for girls. And like I say, my experience was so nothing compared to what other people go through. And I just want to talk about it purely because I know that there will be other people who have started their period really late, and if they went through anything that I went through, I just want to say, like, you were not alone. I completely understand what that feels like. And although I can say, like, oh, I was really well prepared because I'd been experiencing other people's periods, perhaps, it still hit me really hard when it happened. And then the move to college was really difficult because it was all new for me, and everyone there had been doing it for ages. So although part of it is like, oh, but you had like 6 years period free when everyone else has 6 years plus on you. Yeah, I agree. And I feel somewhat lucky for that. But also, it's an experience that I just never really hear people talking about, that if they've started late. I actually only know one other person that started even later than me. So it's just not something that is widely spoken about, and it should be.
Do you think it had an impact of the fact that, did you feel any less of a quote unquote woman? Was that any of the like cattiness in school?
I definitely feel like that played a part, but there was so many things that sort of contributed to that feeling, mainly because I just hated the whole education system. I never really fitted in with anybody. Like, you know me, I'm super goofy and like I'm such a little weirdo, which was not a cool thing to be back in that time. I understand that some people are like really badly bullied, and I'm not saying that, but especially with my body, my period was late. I didn't get breasts until I was probably about 17, like properly, really. I just was such a late bloomer in general that I was often very babied in high school. Right. And like all the girls in my year were like, oh, it's baby Rach. Like I'd always be looked after, but actually it was weird because I feel like as an only child, I'm like quite a independent person. I know you're an only child too, and you feel the same. Like I really wasn't in the mood to be babied, because it's funny being an only child. You're the youngest and the oldest all at once. Yeah. To your parents, at least. And I've always felt quite mature for my age. So the fact that my body was always playing catch up was a very odd sensation, because I actually felt a lot older than I was mentally, probably, but my body was still very, I don't want to say like childlike, but it was just like my whole puberty experience just started way later. I think a lot of that probably had to do with my weight, and I didn't eat very well while I was a teenager for many other reasons. So I think my weight played a massive part in why I started my period late. Right. But even with that put to the side, I do just think overall I was a really late developer. And I think even if I had been eating much better, I still think I would have started late. I think it was like somewhat genetic, somewhat hormonal, somewhat things I was going through at the time. But also you can start really late purely because that's just what your body has decided is going to happen. There's just no information about that. No. That just wasn't talked about. And even though we had this like one lesson on what happens when you have a period, it was so scientific. It was like your wall will fall down and then you'll bleed it out and then you'll create a new wall if an egg isn't fertilized, and that's that. And I was like, yeah, but that's not, I already know that part. I know the scientific thing. The actual bleeding part was just like, and then you bleed, but we won't talk about that bit. And then if the egg doesn't get like, we'll skip the bit about we're actually bleeding. Let's talk about what's happening in the uterus. I'm not looking in my uterus when I'm having a period. Like, that's the part I least needed to know, really. Obviously I needed to know like I was ovulating or something. That's important. Oh, it was just such a silly, it was just also silly, do you know what I mean? It's just that's interesting, because I think a lot of people have this now, but I have an app that tracks my period, because I have endometriosis and my doctors need to know these things. So rather than just me having a piece of paper that I write it on, I have an app because it's easier. I can look at the whole calendar at one go. It's just a lot easier to organize. I've learned more from that app than I ever did from school. That app tells me when I ovulate. That app tells me I don't actually know whether this is part of endometriosis. I should probably try and find out. But ovulation, the 2 main days of ovulation are agony for me. Complete agony. I cannot stand up. And that's got nothing to do with my period. So when someone, obviously not like my friends, but when someone else says, oh, well, what's wrong with you? I can't go, I'm ovulating, because that's not a quote unquote traditional reason or a stereotyped reason to be in pain. But ovulation for me is agony, complete agony. And that isn't something that's spoken about. PCOS, endometriosis, that's not something that we have a conversation about. And that isn't something that everybody suffers with, of course. But there are over 800 million people that bleed. Every single day, there's 800 million people.
and something like just under half of them are in period poverty.
Yeah.
So that's a lack of education, that's a lack of resources, that's a lack of money, that's a lack of running water and hygiene. That's a whole world that really could have its own show on. It's
Really.
far more detailed than I think we could ever go into. So going back on your experience being somebody that bleeds, do you think if you could go back and tell 17-year-old Rach, don't worry, you're going to come on your period, and ignore all of these people, it's fine, do you think you'd go back and have that conversation, or do you think it's made you grow as a person?
I probably wouldn't do it as 17-year-old Rach. I'd probably do it as 14-year-old Rach.
Right.
And I think the reason for that is, I feel like that was the first year that I started anticipating.
Right.
And I still had like another 3 years to go until it actually happened. So I think 17-year-old Rach already knew what to expect. So it'd be a waste of time telling her. I think 14-year-old Rach really was very anxious about starting her period, because it seemed to be something that yet again her body had sort of forgotten to do.
Right.
And I feel like, I would probably just say it's coming, but you got a while to wait. So rather than worrying about it for the next 3 years, just enjoy not having it. And when it comes, you're going to be so prepared anyway that you'll be fine. Because I really then just spent 3 years, obviously not in constant worry, but it was definitely something that played on my mind. And so did all the other things that surround puberty as well. And I just, I would say, and I would just say, stop worrying, you've got another 3 years to go. Like, enjoy your time not having one.
Get rid of that future panic.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's what I'd say to anybody now who is perhaps listening, who is younger and hasn't started, or who is older and who hasn't started. Yeah. Just do all the research you can, so that you know what's going to happen when it comes, but take back the power that you have now to just know that it will eventually happen. And if it doesn't, and you do need help from a medical side to it or anything like that, that can all be sorted.
Yeah.
But just relax, I guess.
Stress is such a factor when it comes to menstruation. Such a factor. I've been stressed in the past. January, you'll probably remember, I had 3 periods in a month because I was so stressed. So that is great advice to, it's scary, but enjoy it while you don't have it, because when you do have it, it's kind of all you think about for like a good few years. It really is. So don't think about it now.
Yeah. It will happen when it happens, and that's absolutely fine, and your body is going to do it when it's ready to do it, and there's no normal time to start. When your body is at the right time, then it will come.
That's a really, really awesome phrase to put at the end of this, is it's never a normal time to start.
No, that's the thing that stuck with me, was I wasn't normal because I hadn't started, but actually my body just wasn't ready until I was 17. My body, until it got to 17 years old, it was not ready to have a period. And now I know that's why I started so late, because it wasn't until I had a 17-year-old body that it was like, right, we've got everything in place to do this now. But before that, my body knew better than I did. And it was like, oh, I'm not ready yet. And your friends can do what they like, but I'm not ready yet. But that's the difference between your mind and your body. They're on 2 different paths. Totally. And my mind was told you're weird because you haven't started, and my body was saying, no, we're not ready. When you get to a good place, then we'll do this.
I think that would hopefully be a really great comfort to some people, that it is never a normal time, and just because the shame and the societal expectations are at a certain level does not mean that your body is ready or not ready for anything. As someone who owns a uterus, I feel like it's my duty to be in tune with my body.
100%, yeah. And I realise that now. Like I've said, I take the pill, and the pill that I'm on, I only have 1 period every 6 months. So again, a lot of people say to me, oh, you're so lucky. Yes, I am, but I'm also taking hormones that affect me. I've got used to them now, and luckily I don't have any real side effects from taking the pill that I'm on. But that's a whole nother topic in itself, like contraception and how that affects your periods. And, you know, I was saying to you the other day, when I do take my break, it's been 6 months since I last had a period, and sometimes it floors me, because, and I know that sounds silly and I feel really like stupid saying that, like I feel kind of, I don't want to say that, but it feels kind of pathetic saying that, because it's like, oh, you only have a period once every 6 months, like, so what if it floors you? It's only once every 6 months. And I know that people, and you especially, are floored by it every month, and that I can't imagine what that's like. But it's a whole nother world if you're on a contraception that like deregulates your periods, basically, because that's something completely else, completely new to get used to.
That's a contraception is a whole conversation in itself, because
100%.
we've talked about this before, because I'm not on any contraception, because it just has too much of a detrimental effect to my body. I'm at a point now where I just think, oh, I'm just not going to bother. Just let my body ride it out and we'll see what happens. But contraception is a whole other side of periods and period poverty, which is totally where that lies as well, especially when people can't afford to go and have it. And
or have access to it even.
Exactly, people that don't live in the UK. Contraception is a whole other world, when we already have to deal with the ridiculous amount of hormones that our body is producing that can have such an effect on us. And then to put another hormone in, you squash back down now, because I don't want you for a month, so I'm going to have to give you this, so you shut up for a bit. Like, how damaging that is.
And I also only found out last year that when I do take a break from my pill, the period I have is like a pretend period. It's actually not getting rid of an egg. Like, I don't ovulate. I didn't know that either.
I think that's a conversation that should be put in with the education side of things. Like,
definitely.
Yes, you're going to have a period. These are all of the things these are all of the complications that could happen while you're on a period. And if you don't want to have your period every month, or you would like to go on a contraception, here are all the contraceptions, and here is what the hormones do to you. It should be an education.
Exactly.
Crazy. We've been going on for a really long time.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's been great. It's been such a good conversation. I've loved this. I can't wait to listen to it back. But let's end on the last topic. Pads, tampons, cup.
Pad. Team pad over here.
Me too. So are there any particular brands or kind of pads that you really, really love?
Yes, actually. I mean, as someone, I obviously don't need to buy mine too often with the pill that I'm on. So when I do get them, I try very hard to, even though I am not a consistent user of the pads, I still want to make sure that I'm doing something good for the planet if possible. I just want to mention a brand that I really love and who I've worked with on my blog before. All of their pads are vegan and cruelty free. No animals are hurt making them, and they don't test on animals at all. They're hypoallergenic, which is something that's really important to me because I suffer with really bad eczema, and I had an allergic reaction yesterday, and I don't even know what it was to. So I have to be really careful. So they're all hypoallergenic. They're all fragrance free, which is something I always look out for as well, because that really, really plays up, especially down below. And all the pads are made from 70% renewable materials, and the plastic backing on the back of them is 50% renewable too. And the little pouch that they come in is also recyclable. And the building that they're made in, even, they've gone as far as to do this, the building that they use to make them all in is powered by renewable energy, and they have a zero waste tolerance, so there is no waste when making them. So it's a really fantastic brand. It's one that you can subscribe to. You can get a monthly box, a bi-monthly box, or a quarter yearly box, and you can customize the box as to how you want it. And they also do tampons, which are 100% organic cotton as well. So I just wanted to do a little mention to my Freda.
Amazing. What a great company. You've told me about them plenty of times.
But they haven't asked me to speak about it in this podcast. I just wanted to mention a brand that I've really enjoyed using before.
And that's really good. It's good for other people, because I think I did know you when I found out how many plastic bags were in a pad, and it just broke my heart. I think it's really great to learn about and find out about brands that are doing their bit, I suppose.
And also, like, it's important to talk about, I also don't want to shame anybody who can't access these brands, because I understand it's not for everybody. It might not work for everyone, and they can be more expensive than the typical brands we get in the supermarket. So I just completely understand if that's not something that you can do, but if it is, then it's something to look into doing.
Yeah, it's worthwhile if you've got the additional funds. It totally is. And luckily so with Morrison's, I found this out the other day, Morrison's, for example, as far as I'm aware, Asda are the same. All of their products now are as eco-friendly as they can possibly get them.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of supermarket owned brands have gone cruelty free as well, which is really good. So it's just something to look out on the label if you can sort of like do a quick scan of the back.
Hopefully it'll be, and generally own brand stuff's a lot cheaper than the Morrison ones are the ones that we have in work, and they're when I don't have anything with me, they're great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rach, for talking to me.
Oh, it's been wonderful, Luce. And I'm going to go see you now for a coffee in real life. I love it.
No, we're like, goodbye. See you in 5 minutes for a coffee.
No, thank you for having me on. It's been wonderful.
So where can people find you?
So on my Instagram, it is @rayofstyle_. If you love fashion, lifestyle, anything along those lines, I'm the one to follow. If you want to go over to my blog, it's rayofstyle.co.uk. I do a post every single week without fail. And if you want to go follow my YouTube channel, it's just Rachel Hatley on YouTube.
Amazing. Oh, thank you so much, Rachel. I'm so chuffed.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. I love talking about this so openly. It's wonderful. Let's get the sort of conversation started.
Yeah, let's. Thank you, darling.
You're welcome. I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
What an incredible podcast. I have just listened back to that before I'm doing this outro, and my good Lord, we spoke about so many incredible things. Me and Rachel have got a really open relationship anyway. We have conversations about stuff like this all the time, and we're very honest and open with each other, which is why I really, really, really wanted her to do this podcast. Thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope you got something from it. I hope you found some kind of connection with some of the things that we said. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. Honestly, it means the absolute world to me. Let's get those posters up in schools, right? I think that's probably the next step. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.